We're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for attending. And my name's Raven Sykes. So I'm one of the senior solutions consultant for the educational vertical. And for today, we just wanted to take this moment to celebrate our LGBT Pride for the month. And for Dude Solutions, and those of you who know, as part of the diversity and inclusion team, Pride Month in June is a time to learn and get inspired and be part of the change for ongoing work for acceptance and equality in the workplace. Today, we welcome Stan Kimmer, diversity and inclusion professional, to celebrate the past, present, and future of the LGBTQ community. So a little background on Stan. I'm gonna kind of go through his bio so you can have some framework to reference by. But Stan is a national recognized consultant and speaker on all areas of workplace diversity with a deep expertise in LGBT diversity. For 4 years, Stan served as IBM's corporate global LGBT diversity manager, during which time he expanded IBM's LGBT diversity initiatives globally and established IBM's procedures for supporting transgenders employees, including case management of employees undergoing gender transition while in the workplace. Since retiring from IBM, Stan has trained or spoken in over 75 venues, reaching over 5,000 professionals. He is a certified out and equal workplace advocates building bridges trainer and a certified trainer management corporation, Berlitz cultural competency trainer and practitioner. That's a mouthful. So,
Yeah.
And he is located right here in Raleigh, North Carolina. He's also the treasurer of Raleigh's LGBT Chamber of Commerce. In addition to his diversity expertise, Stan also offers clients an innovative yet proven program for engaging employees in meaningful organization-specific career planning. Stan holds a bachelor's degree from Georgia Tech, an MBA from University of Chicago Booth School of Business, and in his spare time, he trains as a competitive figure skater. So everyone, please welcome Stan.
Thank you. Thanks for the great introduction. Well, I'm very pleased to be here. I'm just excited to be invited. And I'll tell you a little bit about myself before I jump into this presentation. It should be about maybe 40 minutes long to leave plenty of time for Q's and A's. And hello to everyone who's connected via the webinar. I'm glad to have you on the line. Okay, it's on. Do we need to put my clicker in there? It was working. It's on. The clicker's on.
Another job, cook. Yeah.
Let's see. It was working just a second ago, so. Okay, that was you doing it, okay. No, it'd be easier for me to like drive and click and everything, so. Are you sure? Okay, I got a backup here that we can use in case it goes down again. Okay. Okay, again, a little bit more about me. And then if this thing goes down, we'll just use my clicker. I've even gotten to places where I had to do a presentation, I even forgot the overhead projector thing. Anyway, that's a lot of fun. I do both career development consulting and the diversity consulting, and that stuff was already in my bio. I do have 2 part-time consultants that work with me. I have Elsa Salgado, when I have to do like diversity training in a bilingual environment. She has a master's certificate in HR, and she's bilingual. So when I need to do stuff in Spanish. She comes along with me. And then a lot of times when I'm working with clients around transgender issues, they want an actual transgender person to participate in the training or to assist. So Elaine Martin is my transgender consultant. She's a transgender woman. She also does diversity consulting out on her own. Okay. I think it might be time to go to mine. Where'd the thing go? Is it in here? Yep. Okay. Huh. Yeah. This is kind of interesting. Do you have the thing in there? Do what? Do you think it was the batteries? Okay, so we can take this one back out. Mine. Where did this thing come? Or why don't you try this one? Put that one in. Huh, I think it's a problem with the PC. It doesn't like. I might just have to, too bad I just couldn't go the manual way.
Yeah, you can do manual.
Oh, it'll be a lot of, you'll be hitting it a lot. It's funny that none of these work.
There you go.
Is that mine?
That was yours.
Okay. Aha. Okay, we're gonna go. Here we go. Okay. So I have my 2 part-time consultants, but this is what I like to do when I'm not working. This is my new passion. I started figure skating with no experience at age 59, and I'm actually competing in the adult circuit and doing pretty well. And this week, I am in skating camp all week, and in fact, I just came from the rink in Hillsborough, and I have my friend Susan Frobish, who's visiting with me back here. Wave. She's also known as Princess Leia, and I'm also Darth Vader. And then this is my new program I'm getting ready to do with a puppet from Book of Mormon. So we've been practicing that this week. So I'm having a lot of fun doing this. So the moral is no matter how old you get, you can find a new passion that you can enjoy. So what are we gonna cover in this session? I'm gonna go over why June is LGBTQ Pride Month, go over some basic terms and definitions, just so we're all on the same page with what words mean and everything. Then we're going to do a deeper dive into transgender diversity, because that's one area that's still kind of on the leading edge, and it's kind of like the new frontier of diversity. And there's not a lot of people that know a whole lot about transgender people. I'm going to talk about why is discussing LGBTQ important in the workplace? Why do we need to talk about sexual orientation? And then I'll spend a little time going through the strategic business case, because there is a compelling business rationale why companies like Dude Solutions actually support and honor, LGBT diversity in the workplace. I'll go through a very quick introduction of what are things that companies do around being fully LGBT inclusive. And then we will talk about effectively interacting with LGBTQ people and being an ally, and hopefully a little bit of time for Q's and A's at the end. So even before 1969, this is the 50th anniversary of Stonewall that I'll talk about in a little bit. And that it happened in June 1969. That's why June is LGBT Pride Month. But even before then, there were gay activists in the 1950s and the 1960s who were already building the foundation. One of them is this couple, Del Martin and Phyllis Lyon, that met at work in the 1950s. They were active in several groups. What is really cool is they finally were able to get married when California legalized gay marriage. And then Del, passed away just a few months later, as if she was waiting for it to happen, so she can marry the love of her life. And I actually was at a seminar that they did in 2003 with these two women. It was very interesting. They held up a piece of paper and said, in 1960s, here are all the LGBT affirming books and novels and things that showed gay people in a positive light. It was on one sheet of paper. And now the books that are about our community can fill entire libraries. So things have really moved forward, in the past several years. Another pioneer is Dr. Frank Kameny. He actually was fired from his job as an astronomer with the US government map service. He was fired simply because he was gay. They told him, we're firing you because you're gay. And it did go all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court did not rule in his favor. But when the slogan "Black was beautiful" was around, he created the slogan "Gay is good." He also was the one who led the work to get homosexuality removed from the psychological books as a mental illness. And so he's the one that really pushed that. That's a picture of me. I met him a few years before he died at a banquet. There's like this old man kind of standing by himself. No one was talking to him. And knowing my gay history, I said, that's Frank Kameny. And I walked up to him and said, are you Frank Kameny? And he was like really tickled that I knew who he was. But it was so neat getting to meet him and get my picture taken with him. And then sometimes it goes, okay. And then there's also Bayard Rustin, who is Martin Luther King's right-hand man. And he often organized a lot of Dr. King's marches and events, but they kind of kept him in the background because he was out and gay as a Black man. And he got in the 1970s and 1980s, he focused more on gay rights than Black rights at the time. So what happened? So 1969, last weekend of June, is usually considered the beginning of the modern gay rights movement. People call this the Stonewall Rebellion, the Stonewall Riots, the Stonewall Uprising. Use any three of those that you would like. So to commemorate that 1-year anniversary in June, a lot of big cities had their first LGBT or gay pride marches. Other cities followed suits. And now most cities have their LGBT pride in June, but some have moved it to different times. In North Carolina, we have our statewide one at the end of September because June is so hot here. And also a lot of people leave North Carolina, they go to Washington Pride and New York Pride and Atlanta Pride. So, people can disappear and do it September here. So what actually happened in that weekend in late June? Routinely, the police would raid gay bars, arrest the patrons, put them in paddy wagons, haul them off, publish their names in the newspaper. And, it's kind of a, big ordeal. And finally, that in late June, the patrons at Stonewall Inn and Tavern basically said, we're tired of this police brutality, and they started fighting back. And there were even a couple of drag queens who took off their high heel shoes and were pounding them on the police. Yeah, it's cool to see the transgender people jumping in there and, working. And it turned into, people were picking up, parking meters and hitting police cars. But finally, people said, you know, enough is enough. We're not going to take this, you know, we're not going to take this. Simple, but it's always good to know how to explain this to your friends, that gender identity and sexual orientation are two very different things. Sexual orientation is who you fall in love with, who you're physically attracted to, who you want to spend your life with. You know, if you're gay or lesbian, you're attracted to people of the same gender. If you're heterosexual or straight, you're attracted to people of the opposite gender. If you're bisexual, you're attracted to people of all genders. Gender identity is something that is totally different. Gender identity is the gender you feel deep down inside your core. And it could be the situation of a little boy who's 3 years old and growing up, and his parents are giving him a football to play with and toy soldiers and all this stuff. And he's thinking to himself, you know, I feel like I'm a little girl inside. Why are my parents treating me like a boy? Because 99% of transgender people know there's something different about them, usually at around 3 or 4 years old. Or it could be a little girl growing up and her parents are putting her in these little pretty dresses, you know, for Easter, or, you know, giving her dolls to play with, an easy bake oven. And she's like, why are my parents treating me like a little girl? I feel like I'm a boy inside. And actually, you know, the occurrence is quite rare. Transgender people, most people believe it's 0.03% of the population. So that's a small percentage. But when you look at the United States, that's 250,000 people. So it is a big number, even though it's a small percentage. So gender expression, a person communicates their gender, how they feel about themselves. And often there could be people who, you know, are straight, you know, men who aren't afraid to show a little bit of feminine side in their clothing. Or there's some women who are totally straight, but they don't like to wear stockings and dresses, and they would rather wear jeans and flannel shirts. But it's how you express your gender. Transgender is the umbrella term for the whole population of people whose gender identity differs from that's assigned to them at birth. And then LGBT, it used to be GLBT and LGBT, and people kind of used either way. I think the community has finally now settled on LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. If you have like a network group within like the company, people use A for allies, LGBTA. Q is often added. It can stand for questioning or queer. Queer is a word that used to be kind of a negative word, and it still rankles a lot of older gay people, but now the younger generation is re-embracing the word queer and using it more freely. So it's okay, it's often okay to use queer, especially when you're with a younger group of people. So this is a great way of showing these 4 dimensions of sexuality and orientation. That first of all, you have your gender identity. That's who you feel you are deep down in your core. Regardless of what you look like and your parts, you either feel like, you might feel like a woman or a man inside. Then you have your gender expression. You know, how you express yourself, how you carry yourself, the clothes that you wear. You have your biological sex, the body parts that you're born with. And then you have your sexual orientation, who you fall in love with. And what is very important about this slide is that all of these 4 dimensions are not all the way to the right or all the way to the left. Yes, many of us can say that we fall, you know, on, you know, one side or the other, that I'm a man, I'm 100% man, I'm happy being a man, but but I'm also gay. There can be people who are in the middle somewhere of all these 4 dimensions. So you can have people who feel that they're partially man, partially woman. They could be called gender fluid or gender non-binary. They don't want to identify as a woman or a man 100% of the time. Then you have people who, you know, they dress androgynously. You can't tell from many people's way they dress if they're a man or a woman. Biological sex, yes, there are people who are born with both female and male parts, referred to as intersex. And finally, there are people who fall in love and are attracted to both men and women. And, you know, so they don't, you know, they're not, you know, there are many people who are not 100% heterosexual or 100% homosexual. So just remember that, you know, all of these are spectrums where people can fall anywhere in between. So here's some more definitions around the transgender world. Male to female is someone who starts life as a guy and later transitions to a woman. Probably the most famous one now is Caitlyn Jenner, who used to be Bruce Jenner, the Olympic champion. And in the community, it is perfectly acceptable to say MTF as shorthand for someone who's a transgender person who transitioned from male to female. And then FTM, or female to male, is the other way. Probably the most famous trans man is Chaz Bono, who used to be known as Chastity Bono, the offspring of pop singer Sonny and Cher. Gender transition is the process a person goes through to modify themselves, their body parts and their exterior to match the gender they feel they are deep in their core. And it can be something that takes maybe a year or two if people do it very fast. Some people, it's almost like a lifelong journey of going through gender transition. Cisgender are those of us who are perfectly happy with our birth gender. So cisgender is the opposite of transgender. If you're not transgender, you're cisgender. So if you meet a transgender person, you're talking and you say, hey, I'm your cisgender ally, they'll get a big kick out of it that you understand the lingo. Here's a few, you know, trans women that both Elaine and I know. Martine Rothblatt is probably the most famous. She's the highest paid female CEO and the inventor of Sirius XM radio. She is a transgender woman. There's a woman I know personally who served, you know, in Iraq, and then when she came back from deployment, transitioned to a woman. Christine Beck. Dr. Christine McGinn is probably one of the leading transgender surgeons in the world. She does the surgeries both ways. She herself is a transgender woman. Some trans men, Chaz Bono that I mentioned. Jamison Green is an early leader in the transgender movement. In the 2001, when IBM was looking at adding transgender to our non-discrimination policy and adding health benefits for transitioning people, we actually brought Jamison Green in as our consultant to assist us with that journey. And we also brought in Moonhawk Riverstone, who's been active in the community for almost 30 years. But they're all three trans men who started their life as girls. And then the transgender community is also very diverse. You know, Janet Mock identifies as African American and Hawaiian, and probably some little bit of Asian in her too. Famous author and activist, radio personality. You know, there's a picture of someone who you can't tell by looking at the picture if it's a man or a woman, or if this person identifies as gender fluid. Here's a Hispanic trio of three trans men who all started their life as women. So, also another very interesting fact about the transgender life is that now more people are transitioning or starting to live in their gender at a very young age. As more parents understand the transgender phenomena, you know, some 4-year-old kid says, you know, mommy, I don't feel like a boy, I feel like a girl. And they understand, they'll say, fine, you know, you can live your life as a girl and, you know, and start acting like a girl. Now, of course, the medical community are not going to mess with her body until after she gets through puberty, but you know, now more parents are accepting of their trans children. And also, there's many more people now that it's much more discussed. There are older people who are going through the transition because they're either retired and not worried about their work any longer, or their kids are grown up and out of the house. so it doesn't impact their family. So we see a lot more older and younger people going through transition. So why is this a real phenomena? And I love it when Elaine shares about this slide. She'll often say, how many of you, when you wake up, have to remind yourself what gender you are? You just get out of bed, you know who you are. Trans people have to remind themselves, you know, hey, yeah, I guess I am a man, even though I feel like a woman. And most transgender people dream in the gender they identify with deep in their core. So Elaine, before she transitioned from male to female, she would still dream as if she was a woman in her dreams. There's a sense of being different from an early age. WPATH stands for the World's Physician Academy of Transgender Health. So there's a set of physicians who are deep experts in transgender phenomena, and they actually have written basically a manual of care for what you do with a transgender person. And they basically say that it is biology. It's a way a person is hardwired and born. It's not a choice that they make. A person doesn't wake up one day and say, you know, I'm tired of being a man. I feel like I want to be a woman. Let me go through this transition. Instead, it's something that's ingrained in them. And it's something that's consistent, persistent, insistent. It doesn't go away. So basically, the choice a transgender person has is, what do I do with this? Do I live, you know, one gender at work as a professional and then on nights and weekends live in my chosen gender? Or do I, you know, just hide it all of my life? Or do I go through this whole process of changing my gender? And actually, what's interesting is the EEOC, the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission, will actually often take cases of discrimination from transgender people and pursue it under the category of sex or gender. So I was talking, oh yeah, who was I talking? I was talking to someone, I can't remember who, the other day. Yeah, maybe it was Susan. I was talking to someone the other day, and you know, there are a lot of people that don't realize that in most states, you can fire someone simply for being gay. And a lot of people don't realize that. In North Carolina, you know, if you work for a company that doesn't include sexual orientation and gender identity in their EO policy, you can be fired because your boss doesn't like gay people or the owner doesn't like gay people. It's not protected under federal law. Those dark colored states up here on the map are those that have state laws where, according to in that state, you can't fire a person for being gay. And the ones that have exclamation points, those are states that have passed laws that say that a municipality or a county cannot add categories into their non-discrimination laws that are not in the state law. That's the part of HB 2 that's still on the books. So in other words, if Asheboro decide that we want to pass a city ordinance to protect gay people, they're not allowed to do that because of our state government. And we're in good company along with Tennessee and Arkansas. Oh, Wisconsin's a little bit lighter. I think that because they protect on sexual orientation, but not gender identity. Okay, so, you know, once in a while, someone will say, why do you have to go around telling people you're gay? I don't walk around the workplace telling everybody I'm straight and announcing it to the world. And I say, but hey, it just comes up in daily conversation. You come in from work on Monday. Monday, you all go out for lunch. What did you do this weekend? It'll come up. My boyfriend and I went to the beach. You know, my girlfriend and I did this. You know, or I say my husband and I did that. You know, is this going to come up in conversation? People don't go around saying I'm straight or I'm gay. But if you're just a human being living your life, it's going to come out in natural conversation. You know, what do people have on their desk or in their cube, in their workspace? Usually a picture with their spouse or their family. You know, what do people wear wedding rings? It's like, you know, it's just where everything is out there in the world. So basically, you know, if a gay person can't be out, they can basically say, well, I'm going to avoid my coworkers. I know they're going to ask about my weekend. I don't want to tell them, so I'll just kind of hide and be kind of elusive. And then people will say, well, why is that person so unfriendly? or they'll make up a fake girlfriend or a fake boyfriend, and then they'll come across as disingenuous when someone finds out. So it's really important that everybody feel free to bring themselves to work as they are and to feel accepted no matter who they are. So this is kind of going into the business case, which is, you know, when I do workshops for like executive leaders or for business people, I talk about that, you know, LGBT matters for recruiting the best people, keeping them and having them perform at their peak, diversity of ideas and talents, marketing, customer service, social responsibility. So first of all, recruiting. If you want to get the best employees, you want to have 100% of the talent pool there on the table for you to look at and consider. You know, why should you remove anyone from the talent pool? You know, you want to look at Hispanics, Blacks, LGBT people, white men, women, people with disabilities. You want to have 100% of the talent pool, because the bigger your talent pool, the better your chances of finding the right people for the right job. Then, hey, you go out and recruit a bunch of great diverse people. You want them to perform at their best and to stay there. And what happens is if they don't feel comfortable, they might leave after 6 months or a year and go work somewhere else. And that's a very expensive proposition of continuing to onboard and train new employees. So one of the important factors is, you know, what makes a person feel comfortable at work? It's not necessarily what the HR department says. It's not what the executive team says. The two major things that impact how an LGBT person feels at work is how am I being treated by my coworkers and how am I being treated by my immediate boss or manager. So, you know, if everybody in the workforce is not trained to totally include everyone and to welcome everyone, that can have a big impact on people wanting to stay. Then you have diversity of ideas, that organizations that have diverse people will have different ways of looking at problems, looking at what customers might want. And so, you know, you want to have bright ideas, new ideas. You don't want everyone to be thinking alike. And if you have a diverse team that have people with different experiences, including being LGBT, they'll have a different way of looking at issues and problems and designing products. Marketing and sales. The LGBT consumer base is huge, and the LGBT community has a real great expendable income. And so, you know, every company wants to go and get, you know, their share of LGBT dollars. So, but here's the thing that's important to do solutions that, yeah, okay, the LGBT community has $150 billion in spending power, but you don't market to the individual consumer. However, as a business-to-business business, you are going to be interacting with LGBT decision makers. You know, the corporate executives that you call on to sell your products and services, the procurement agents that you're dealing with. You know, they might be saying, does this company treat diversity properly? And now a lot of corporations and companies will look through a diversity lens to say, is this a company I want to do business with? So this marketing component is very important when you're looking at business to business. And then community reputation. That, especially here in the US, people will look at a company and say, do they support my community? Are they doing the right thing? You know, do I see this bank, this company, this health insurance company, whatever, do they have like a table at Out Raleigh? Do they support my community? Do they give to LGBT organizations? You know, what are they doing in my community? You know, people like look, you know, LGBT people look at Chick-fil-A and say, you know, they're kind of doing the opposite. They're harming our community. So we're not going to do business with them. So that community reputation is a very important aspect of why LGBT diversity matters, and that you need to, you know, be supportive through your community support programs of the LGBT community. So what do companies do You say, okay, I get the business case. If I'm going to execute LGBT diversity, what do I need to do? And I'm going to look at things in 5 different spheres: policies and benefits, talent management and professional development, workplace climate, advocacy and corporate responsibility, and commitment to the community. So going through these very quickly, one by one, do you have the words sexual orientation and gender identity and expression in your equal opportunity or non-discrimination statement? That's basically the floor. You have to start there, and Dude Solutions does. Then having major benefits. Do you treat same gender couples equally in terms of benefits, family leave, adoption policy, these kind of things? And then if you have a global presence, do you also expand your equal opportunity statement globally? And that's one of the things that IBM did when I was in that job, is instead of having each country have their own EO statement, we just had one global IBM statement that included sexual orientation and gender identity in every country around the world where we did business. Then you have talent development. Do you have either an LGBT resource group or LGBT people represented on your diversity council or your diversity group to make sure that LGBT people are being heard? Do you have targeted recruiting events? Maybe working with the LGBT Center at NC State to find talent. Do you have opportunities for LGBT employees to compete for leadership and management jobs? And are they given the chance, along with everyone else, to progress in the business? And do you actually measure these things? That, hey, we are bringing in LGBT employees. LGBT people are getting promoted. One of the things that we did at IBM is we actually tracked our out gay executives, so that younger employees can see and say, hey, I can be out and gay and progress to senior leadership positions at IBM. Workplace climate. Diversity training for all employees. That includes LGBT content. Companies that do opinion surveys or climate surveys, they might break the data down by race, gender, and LGBT, if it's a critical mass, to analyze, do the LGBT people here feel as excited about their jobs as everybody else? And making sure that LGBT diversity is included in senior leadership metrics. Advocacy and policy sharing best practices, advocating for good legislation. When HB2 happened, most companies went and spoke against it and said, this hurts recruiting our talent. It hurts when we do business out of state. Some companies might want to talk to us. Oh, you're from North Carolina. You have that law. And actually, I've had 3 major clients that I worked with who told me they had issues recruiting talent because of HB2. So, companies are outspoken about things that happen wrong in government. And then companies have supplier, do you include LGBT in your supplier diversity program if you have one? And then finally, supporting community organizations and events like the LGBT Center. Do you, if you're a consumer product company, you'd want to, advertise to the LGBT market. And I know I'm throwing a lot of things at you quickly, so you can ask the team here, and you can send the charts to anyone who asks. Anybody wants the slides, go ahead and let them have them. Language is very important, and I actually have this for all constituencies. I have about 4 charts that cover women, Hispanic, Black, people with disabilities. But in terms of the LGBT community, there's certain words and language to use and not use. So I have the proper term now, outdated. Something that's 20 years old, probably not in use much, but it's not technically wrong. And then, of course, offensive words. So here's one thing that's very interesting is a lot of people say sexual preference by mistake, and they don't realize that it's offensive to the gay community. Because sexual preference kind of connotes that you made a choice to become gay. And the far right wing uses the term sexual preference to kind of say it's a choice that you make. good behavior. If you hear an LGBTQ joke that's not exactly becoming, or even a joke about any kind of constituency that's not cool, you probably ought to speak out and say to that person, you know, that's harmful, that's not kind. And also having zero tolerance for anti-LGBT behavior. And okay, here we go again.
Sorry, I'll stick to the audio.
Okay. And then also my friend Susan is a great ally to the LGBT community. And if any of you know who Randy Rainbow is, she's a big fan of his. So you'll have to go talk to her afterwards. How many of you know who Randy Rainbow is? Ah, see a couple. Okay, she introduced me to him. So being an ally in action, be visible if you're an ally, speak out on behalf of the LGBT community, share resources, use inclusive language. Avoid making assumptions when you meet someone. If you meet a guy, don't say, do you have a wife? You say, do you have a spouse? Or do you have somebody special in your life? And so don't make assumptions if, because in a heterosexist world, people kind of assume you're straight unless you say otherwise, but we can have a broader way of talking with people. And also attend and support, LGBT community events. Out Raleigh is a wonderful event. LGBT Pride in Durham at the last weekend of September is also a really fun event with lots of vendors. And those events are friendly family, bring the kids. It's a lot of fun. So, we are now at write down my email address if you ever want to email me questions, or if you want to subscribe to my monthly newsletter. My phone number is there if you need to call me about anything. And you can go ahead, Raven, and moderate Q's and A's from the audience, and also from those that might be typing them in on the webinar. And I welcome questions about anything. I'm not shy. I love questions, especially difficult ones.
I'll start, Stan. So I know we were talking before we got started, but one of the questions about how to be deliberate in engaging with people who are different. And so I guess from your discussion about LGBTQ, what are some of the things that us as co-workers or direct managers can do to be deliberate, I guess, in just common scenarios?
Okay, I would say, just interact with, LGBT people on the same level as you would anybody else. So like if you, are talking with a coworker and they like to share about their husband or wife, don't shy away from someone who might be gay talking about their boyfriend or girlfriend or their spouse. And so that's a great way of just including them, in social events. Like if you do things where, say, hey, bring your spouse, we're going to go out and all meet for drinks, after work, invite the LGBT person to bring their same gender, person. Also be open to people who might share about having LGBT kids or relatives. Because a lot of times they'll be looking for support. You might, think that, hey, I know this person is straight and they might not be interested in this topic, but they might have, an LGBT brother or sister that they want to share about. So kind of, if you let people know that you're, an opening, accepting, tolerant person, kind of can open the conversation to people sharing those kind of things with you.
I noticed in some of your definitions, terminology, and when you had the acronyms up there.
Ah.
Sometimes you had LGBTIQ. What was I never heard about an I. What was the I?
Yeah, also there's a lot, and the longest one you can have, the Georgia Tech Center, has LGBTQIA. I is intersexed. And then A can be asexual, people who aren't attracted to anybody. Yeah, I don't know if I've ever met someone, but rumor has it they exist. And a lot of, before your question, a lot of people are getting a little bit tired of the longer and longer, what they call it, alphabet soup. So a lot of people now say queer, especially younger people. And also one that's becoming popular is LGBTQ+. You might start seeing that a lot.
So how did you get into the whole diversity thing?
That's a fun, and actually I do a talk, I love that question because I do another talk called, more of a TED style talk called My 8 Life Lessons I Learned as an Out Gay Man that applies to anybody. And what happened is I didn't accept my own self being gay until I was in my mid-30s. And then I came out very slowly, first to close friends and family. And then when IBM announced domestic partner benefits in 1996, I volunteered to do an interview with the News and Observer about why this was so important to me. So then my name was splashed all over the newspaper. Everyone knew I was gay. And at that time, I was the highest ranking out gay person at RTP IBM. 10,000 employees, and I was the highest ranking person. I was a senior professional. I wasn't executive yet, but I was one level below. So every time they had executive panels, like the woman vice president, the Hispanic vice president, the black vice president, that have me representing the LGBT community. So I'd participate in these panel events, and I didn't know it, but while I was on these panels, the vice president of diversity often heard me speak on them. And then one day he called me out of the blue and said, I would like you to be IBM's global LGBT diversity manager. And what I use for that example is, you never know who could be watching you and what good might come of it. So I was like completely shocked that he wanted me to take on that role, and that's how I got into the LGBT diversity work. Also, interestingly enough, in my church denomination, which is LGBT affirming, I started also getting involved in a lot of race relations work and learning about white privilege and about racism. So often in my church environment, I did a lot of workshops on, multicultural and multiracial, how to build, multiracial, multicultural communities, and dealing with, issues of racism, like within the religious community. And being on the IBM diversity team, handling LGBT diversity, of course, I got to become familiar with all the other diversity aspects simply because of being in that department. Are there any questions online?
Yes, there is one. So, online question. It says, what are some ways we can celebrate the LGBTQ community year long, not just during Pride Month?
I would do things like look for LGBT events that you can support and get involved in. For example, the North Carolina LGBT Film Festival is in August. Gay Pride is in September. You can do things, volunteer and do things with the LGBT Center of Raleigh or the LGBT Center of Durham. What's interesting is that it seems like corporate America and even the US have decided to have different months for the different constituencies. I think February is Black History Month, Women's History Month is March, Hispanic Cultural Month is the last half of September, the first half of October. Veterans Employment Month might be November. So all the constituencies kind of have their month where they're focused, and they kind of like, this is the month to celebrate. But then there are good things you can do all year, to kind of embrace the LGBT community. like supporting the LGBT Center. Out Raleigh is a street festival that happens in early May. And then there's another thing called National Coming Out Day, which is October 11th. So you can look for, online information there and maybe, participate. And then November 25th, I believe it is, but toward the end of November is the Transgender Day of Remembrance, where the community recounts the transgender people who have been murdered in the previous year. As kind of and a lot of communities, Raleigh included, has like a candlelight vigil where they speak about, that the murder rate of transgender people is 9 times that of non-transgender people. And so they, talk about, why is that happening in our society and what can we do to address it? Thank you.
It's not really a question, but a lot of people don't know this, but Raleigh actually just became, Raleigh just distinguished June as Raleigh's Pride Month recently. So I went to a lot of the events this month. They're really fun. There's actually a drag show this Friday in Raleigh if you guys want to go. It's free. But on top of that though, next year hopefully they're trying to have like a more Pride festival for Raleigh. But Raleigh, Pride is officially June for Raleigh, so that's good.
Yeah, the Raleigh city government and most of all the major cities in North Carolina are LGBT progressive, protect LGBT employees, do things like support the LGBT Center, designating June as LGBT Pride Month. So, there's a lot of, good things happening across the state. And also, even Governor Cooper, it's not publicized very much, but he did an executive order basically saying that the executive branch of the North Carolina government will only give new contracts and do business with companies that have non-discrimination statements that include sexual orientation and gender identity. So even at our state level, there's some good things happening. Thank you. Back here.
To add to your answer about year-long events, there's Stonewall Kickball League. Haven't heard that has seasons of bowling, flag football, kickball, tennis year-round.
And that's a very good point, that there's a lot of things like what I call gay things happening like that welcome straight people. That the community is very, you don't have to be gay to, join the Stonewall Kickball League. That it's a very open community, that you can be a supporter, you can be an ally and participate in some of these things. I was 1 year in the gay bowling league for a year. Yeah. I decided to take up skating instead. Thank you.
I have another online question for you. So it says, how do you love people through their phobias of LGBTQ? I have a family very rooted in their beliefs and get so frustrated trying to open their eyes beyond their current beliefs.
Yeah. That's a tough question, because there are lots of parts of our society where, LGBT, that people are, discriminatory or believe that LGBT people are sinners or shouldn't be here. And I think that the way to turn the tide is for these people to get to know LGBT people. And the more of us that come out and they see us that, hey, we're your family members, we're your doctor, we're your teacher, hopefully that'll turn the tide, that I'm human just like you. And there's no reason for you to dislike me because I'm gay. And one of my 8 life lessons was how my partner Rich handled my father. When my father learned I was gay, he basically said, I love you, you're my son, but I will never come to your house when Rich is there, and Rich will never be welcome in our house. And of course, Rich could have said, well, if your father doesn't want anything to me, I don't want anything to do with him. But instead, Rich took the high road, and when my father fell off the roof and broke his ankle, Rich went over every week and did their yard work. and won my father over. And then it was like, I go out of town and my father invites Rich over for dinner. You know, because, so, you know, kind of like being, and also, you know, instead of like, you know, fighting hate with hate, you know, try to like combat it with, you know, being friendly and trying to be a real person. And the tide will turn little by little. And I think we've seen movement, you know, in the United States, where more and more people now are accepting of LGBT people, are in favor of same-gender marriage. A huge majority now believe that LGBT people should not be discriminated at work. And hopefully, and then also even as a straight ally, you know, that you might, you know, kind of call someone if they're hateful toward LGBT people, you know, basically say, you know, I have a friend who's gay, and it's all these mean things. I told the story to Susan about, you know, my mother when she was in college. My mother, her parents are Jewish and Catholic. Back in the days when that didn't happen. And, you know, and my grandmother would visit the college and everybody loved her. And her name was Lillian Helm, nice Anglo name. And then one day, all the girls in the sorority were trashing Jews and talking about, you know, how bad and nasty Jews are. And my mother finally just put her fist down and said, you know, you're talking about my mother. And the girls felt so ashamed because they, you know, were saying these bad things about a group of people, not realizing that they were spewing hate at individuals. So hopefully those kind of things and stories, you know, will turn the tide on, you know, people who are unfriendly to the LGBT community and don't accept us as fully human and equal people. Yes.
As an ally,
Hi.
here, there is a broad movement in this area for a group called Free Mom Hugs.
Ah.
And it's definitely becoming more popular in the area. And if there are any other allies here that would like to participate in something like that, my name is Laura King, and reach out to me and I'll see if I can find a group.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. I think it's about 4 o'clock, so we probably have to end. But I think there's some treats up here, and I'll stick around and just chat with people. And you can talk to Susan about Randy Rainbow or skating. So I thank you all for inviting me here. It's been a great group, and I love your questions. So I'll turn it back over to Raven.
Yeah, just again, thank you for attending and those online for participating, and Stan, of course, for your presentation and just educating us on more about this. So like you said, the snacks are for you guys to take back or share with others, and have a good rest of your day.
I'll let you turn it on. Thank you. I love doing this.